Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I want to talk to you about roses that are in trouble. I talked about this before, but today I want to start with this guy right behind me here, which doesn't look like much right now, kind of a shrubby, scrubby, sprawling thing, but in the early spring it loads down with these beautiful, nicely scented purple flowers that just make those stems arch in the most beautiful way. I'm inserting some pictures right now. This is called Robert Le Diable, and it's pretty hard to find on the market. Last year, however, I was able to propagate 24 of these things and send them out through the mail to gardeners across Canada and here for local sale on the farm, and so now many more of these are in the trade. That's been kind of my mission. I talk a lot on this channel about how to, but this goes into the why to. Why did I get into the business, and why do I want to propagate roses? Robert Le Diable is one of those examples, but I have others. Stanwell Perpetual is a Scots rose. Some people call them Scotch roses, but I call them Scots because it's not a whiskey. The Stanwell Perpetual is a beautiful rose with a light pink color, looks delicate but is super tough and vigorous and hardy to cold climates. Again, not that commonly offered on the market, a little hard to propagate. The financial incentive is not there to continue propagating it in large numbers because it's out of patent. You can't earn that much money from it. So here I am, I'm keeping it in the market. Last year I was able to do, something like 10 of those. And again, ship them out to Alberta and so on, and also sell it on local sale. So let's talk for a minute about why some of these older, out of trade, out of patent varieties are endangered in people's gardens. Some of the newer rose suppliers, or any rose supplier at all really, commercially, wants to make the most money they can. I made a whole video about this a while back called Roses Are in Trouble. It goes into the demographic and industry changes that have made these roses at risk. I'll give you the example of David Austin roses in England. Obviously, their financial interest is very tightly attached to the newest roses, the ones that are in patent protected. Nobody else can propagate them. So basically, once a rose goes past 20 years old, they don't have that much interest in it. They may keep it in the catalog for a few years until they have a replacement, but they really don't have an interest in keeping them on the market. There's an older rose called Radio Times that I got a cutting of recently. Beautiful rose. Everything I can see, I haven't seen it bloom in my garden yet, but everything I can see online is that this is a gorgeous rose and with a kind of a terrible name, but wonderful rose. And again, it's kind of hard to find in the trade now, but again, I've propagated it now. I'll have a mother plant. I'll be selling those on the local market or trading those with other rose growers. So again, those older out of patent roses, that's why they're at risk right now. Let's just assume for a moment that you are convinced and you want to take personal action on preserving out of trade garden roses. What can you do? And I take this down to individual action because I think individual is the only sensible unit for moral action in the universe. I say that in a very sweeping way, but too many people look around and say, well, why don't the rose societies do something about it, or why don't the companies do something about it? No, it really comes down to, as an individual gardener, there's things that you can do to get these roses into your garden and preserve them. So number one in that would be, of course, to educate yourself about the different kinds of roses. There's probably a whole world of roses out there that you don't know about, and that if you learned a little bit about them, maybe you'd have an interest in putting them into your garden. The Bourbon roses, the Scots roses, the Portland roses. There's a whole bunch of roses throughout history that now have fallen out of the trade, more or less. They're hanging on by a thread in people's gardens, that if you read the right book, you might get inspired and try it out in your garden and see that you're successful at it and see that it works for your climate and your region. So that's the first thing I'd say, is go and learn about the old varieties of roses. They don't have to be that old. They can be, like I said, the older David Austins, the hybrid teas, the early hybrid teas, the hybrid musks are from the first part of the 20th century. So they don't have to be hundreds of years old, and they don't have to be just once bloomers, but there are lots of roses out there that maybe you don't know about that if you tried in your garden, you might love them. I will put a list down in the description of the video of some of my favorite books on roses, but also you can get them in videos. I've made a whole series on the old garden roses and the different classes that you can go through just as a starting point, a jumping off point to learning about roses you might want to grow. The second thing, of course, is to collect them. I'm going to put a star, an asterisk beside this one, and return to it in a minute. Collecting them can be as easy as finding them at a nursery and purchasing them online, having them shipped to you. They can be a little bit harder to find, so I will return to the topic. The third thing is, once you have them in your garden, obviously, you want to grow them well, but you also want to label them, tag them, It's actually one of the most important things you could do is have them in your garden and have a tag that says what it is, that if for later propagation or later preservation efforts, that you know what they are. Enough said on that point. The fourth thing is you should learn how to propagate roses. People say to me, well, that's hard. And I get it. I think it can be a really, really rewarding part of the hobby. And, you know, obviously there are some ways that you can share your roses that don't involve propagation, but propagation makes it a more certain thing. Once you have roots on that rose, you can trade it, you can send it in the mail. You can be pretty certain that somebody else can take that and grow it in their garden and succeed with it. And so, like I say, I think it can be a fun and rewarding part of the hobby. So I would just encourage you, lots of resources on that. Whether you use my videos, you can use Mike Kincaid's. There's lots of people telling you how to propagate roses. Finally, I would say now comes time to share your roses. And by sharing, I don't mean necessarily you have to give them away, although you can give them to neighbors or friends or other people in your rose area, in the area that love roses. But you can also sell them or trade them, and that's fine too. There's lots of ways to go around this. I'm going to put an asterisk beside that one too, because the sharing part of it and the collecting part of it go together in this special class of activities that, even though I say individual action is where I prefer to put my efforts, you're going to need other people for those activities. Whenever you find a rose, or whether you're trying to disseminate the roses, you're going to have to connect with other people. Behind me is my stock field of roses. These are the mother plants I take all my cuttings from. About 300 different varieties that I've collected over the last 15 years. At first I had an easy time finding them in the trade, but then a couple of those suppliers dried up, just disappeared off the map. And parts of their catalogs I haven't seen on the market ever since, which just concerns me. I guess that's the whole point of this, is that some of those are just gone. Now, they might be living in people's gardens at this point, but I wouldn't know about it, which is what we try to bring people together and trade these varieties and conserve them and keep them into the trade. To that end, I created something called the Canada Rose Exchange. That's a Facebook group where people who are interested in roses can join. Obviously, you can just join up to share pictures of your garden and talk about the problems that you have, but one of the main purposes of the exchange is that people trade roses. In fact, I've come across many people who have different roses that I didn't grow, and we've worked out trading deals where they would root their rose, I would have my stock here, and then when they had it ready, they would send it to me and I would give them a rose in exchange. That's the way it's supposed to work. I want to give you an example of Etoile de Hollande. This one came out of the blue for me. Somebody from the Vancouver Rose Society just reached out to me by email one day and said, hey, there's an early hybrid tea climber called Etoile de Hollande climbing. Would you like one? I said, sure. Well, it just appeared on my front doorstep one day. No exchange required or asked, but what a wonderful generous gesture that he did, I'm sure, not just for my sake, but for the future of that rose, to get it into people's gardens. So this is why you need other people to help you with this. And even though I really feel like I like the individual mode of action. You don't need a bureaucracy. You don't need, a committee. You don't need a bunch of volunteers. You just need to do it yourself, and that keeps you in control. It also keeps it kind of resilient. That is, you're not going to be hit by a funding decrease from the community garden or from the government. So it keeps it a little more resilient as far as I'm concerned, but it also keeps it a little bit more, local. That is, I can trade with people in my local area. I can grow towards my local growing conditions. It keeps it kind of a little more resilient as far as I'm concerned if there are a bunch of people all over the place maintaining these roses and trading amongst themselves. But you do need to have that group action mode sometimes, and it can be very, very useful. I want to talk to you about one of those instances. Last week I got to attend a virtual tour of the Summerland Ornamental Gardens up near Kelowna, or near Summerland, BC. Now, the cool thing about their garden is it's volunteer organized and operated. Rick, one of the volunteers, presented the information about the gardens. They've got lots of wonderful old gardens in there, things that are rare in the trade now. Prairie Peace came from my farm here. He got that from me a number of years ago. They have lots of other old Canadian roses. They have lots of other old David Austin roses. And they just have a dedicated group of volunteers who maintain and deadhead and present these roses to the public. But one of the cool things about the garden is that it acts as a repository. It stays there as they've identified these roses and maintained these roses. It becomes a safety spot for these roses to live in the gardens, and that if somebody like me wants to come along later and get cuttings for that, that's a deal I have coming up. I'm going to visit there next summer, and I'm going to work with Rick to get some of those propagated and get them back into the trade a little bit. So I think that this is a wonderful example of what local action can do from individuals who are very interested in keeping roses in the trade. Well, I shared that story really to send the message that any one of you, any one of us really, can become a hero in this preservation effort. I want to share with you one more preservation effort that's going on right now, and this comes from a friend of mine, Kimberly from the Rose Geek YouTube channel. You remember we did a collaboration not too long ago. Well, she's taken on a slightly different angle on this. Her thought is that maybe some people are reluctant to try to propagate their own roses, so maybe they could take the cuttings and send those to suppliers. And she's had a number of suppliers down in the States sign on for this kind of an exchange, where the customer will send them the cuttings and then the supplier will give them some kind of benefit in return. I think that's a great idea. What a wonderful way to get rare roses into the hands of the people who can propagate them and get, and again, go and disseminate those roses in the world after that. One of the other things that she's done to go along with that is to put together a list of what roses people want and what they're trading and everything else. Those are available through her YouTube group, Facebook group, the Rose Geek Facebook group. And people have asked me the question of whether I would join something like that, or whether I would welcome that kind of an exchange, and the answer is an emphatic yes, of course. If you have cuttings, I would prefer to get rooted roses from local people who can tell me, that they've grown them in their gardens, that they love them, they do well in this area. That would be my strongest preference. But that being said, I will trust you. I will trust you from wherever you are that a rose is worth growing in a garden. Send me the name if I don't have it already, and you can stand behind it and say, yes, I definitely think that this is worth having in gardens. Then we will find a way. As I say, I prefer to get rooted roses, but if it's a matter of you're uncomfortable with your propagation skills and you can only send the cuttings, or it's the right time of year for that, we will work something out on that. The whole point here is to get roses again into the hands of people, get them growing in multiple places, get them trading, get them moving. All of this is to the good, so I can wholeheartedly get behind that effort. I think it's a great move, especially, again, she's working out of the US, for the US suppliers. I think that's a fantastic thing. This might be a thing worldwide. Obviously YouTube is a worldwide audience where each country has to manage their own kind of efforts, or even each region or location has to manage their own efforts. So I don't think it's just going to be one magic bullet that solves this whole thing, but it warms my heart and makes me very excited to see so many different leaders coming out there working towards preservation of these out-of-trade roses around the world. All right, thank you so much for watching. That's all I have on the topic. If you have any questions, please drop those down in the comments below.